It feels like just yesterday, the US and India were talking up this mega partnership. But now, they're staring down the barrel of a full-blown trade war. So let's get right into it and unpack what's behind this really sudden and frankly dramatic showdown. Yeah, this is the number that's causing all the chaos. 50%. It's a huge, staggering figure. So you've got to ask, what does a number like that actually mean for one of the world's biggest and, fastest growing economies? Well, it means pretty much everything India sells to the United States is about to get hit with a crushing 50% tax. I mean, just think about that. With one move, India is suddenly one of the most heavily taxed trading partners the U.S. has. We're talking about putting them in a league with countries that have, let's say, very strange relationships with Washington. So, yeah, that really is the million-dollar question we're going to dig into. How on earth did we get here? I mean, going from celebrating a friendship to being on the brink of a massive trade crisis, it's a huge shift. All right, let's break it all down. Okay, so it all kicked off with this shock announcement from the White House. They basically doubled down on existing tariffs, and it was a move that absolutely blindsided New Delhi. So here's the breakdown. The U.S. jacked up its tariffs from an already steep 25% all the way to 50%. The official reason? They say it's a penalty because India is buying Russian oil, which, in Washington's view, undermines the sanctions on Moscow. But India's firing back, saying, hold on, our purchases are about energy security, it's about market prices, it's not a political statement. And India's response? It was swift and it was firm. The foreign ministry didn't pull any punches, calling the tariffs both unfair and unjustified. And they made it clear they're going to do whatever it takes to protect their national interests. So yeah, this is not a government that's signaling it's going to back down anytime soon. Now, it's pretty important to understand the kind of tool the U.S. is using here. They're called secondary tariffs. Think of it like this. It's not just about penalizing Russia. It's a way for the U.S. to put pressure on anybody who keeps doing business with Russia. It's a really high-stakes gamble, basically turning trade policy into a geopolitical weapon. Okay, so what does a 50% tariff actually do to an economy? Let's get into the numbers because the potential fallout here is, well, it's immense. So that's the value of Indian goods that head to the U.S. every single year. With this new tariff, almost all of that trade is suddenly at risk of just not making financial sense anymore. I mean, you hear exporters saying they can barely handle a 10% hike, forget about 50%. And here's why this stings so much. The U.S. isn't just any market. It's India's single biggest export destination. We're talking about nearly a fifth of everything India sells to the rest of the world. So you can see why losing even a little piece of that would be a massive, massive blow to their economy. Right, so the economists, the folks at places like Nomura, they've crunched the numbers, and the forecast isn't pretty. A sustained tariff like this could shave off as much as 0.4 percentage points from India's annual GDP growth. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it could be enough to push their growth below that really crucial 6% mark. And look, this isn't just about abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. There's a real human cost here. These tariffs seem to be aimed squarely at the sectors that employ tons of people. We're talking textiles, gems, jewelry. This is threatening the livelihoods of literally millions of people. But here's something interesting. Not everything is being targeted, for now at least. Key sectors like electronics and pharmaceuticals are exempt. Even the iPhones that are made in India are shielded. This kind of suggests a very calculated, maybe surgical approach from Washington. But that's not much comfort to the industries that did get hit. So let's move beyond the economic numbers for a second, because this crisis also marks a really stunning political U-turn. It really is a story about a friendship that seems to have just crumbled in a matter of months. I mean, think about it. It really wasn't that long ago. We're talking early 2025. President Trump is hosting Prime Minister Modi in Washington, calling him a great friend. The two of them were laying out this incredibly ambitious plan to more than double their trade, aiming for $500 billion. Okay, now fast forward just a few months, and wow, the language could not be more different. You look at the headlines, you listen to the analysts, and they all pretty much agree the relationship has hit rock bottom. This timeline really shows just how quickly things went south. Right after that friendly visit, the whole tone just changed. First, we started hearing public criticism of India's economy. Then, something that always rankles New Delhi, the US started repeatedly comparing India to its rival, Pakistan. So you see, the big tariff announcement in August, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was really the final step in a months-long downward spiral. So all of this puts India in an incredibly tough spot. You might say they're caught between a rock and a hard place, facing a set of choices where pretty much every option is loaded with significant risk. Basically, India's looking at three very difficult paths. Option one, negotiate. But that could mean giving in on sensitive areas like their protected farming sector, which would be politically explosive at home. Option two, retaliate. Hit back with their own tariffs, just like they did in 2019. But that could spark a full-blown trade war. And option three, pivot. They could deepen their ties with Russia and China, but that risks alienating the US and the West for a long time. As you can see, there are just no easy answers here. And this slide really gets to the absolute heart of India's dilemma. Look at this. Before 2022, Russian oil was less than 1% of India's imports, a tiny fraction. Now, it's more than a third. That cheap, discounted oil has become absolutely vital for India's energy security and for keeping its economy running. You can't turn off a tap like that overnight. It's simply not an option. And all of this brings us to a ticking clock. The whole world, and you can bet the financial markets especially, are holding their breath, just watching to see what happens next. The White House has put a firm deadline on the table. So this isn't some abstract threat, right? It's a real policy with a hard start date. That means the next 20 days are absolutely critical. It's a tiny window for what you have to imagine will be some pretty frantic, high-level diplomacy, which is really the only thing that can pull this back from the brink. And that date is August 27th. That's the day these 50% tariffs are set to kick in, locking in all that economic damage we talked about and maybe cementing this political divide. And so we're left with this one final, really critical question. Is this just a negotiating tactic? A temporary fight between friends that can be patched up? Or are we actually witnessing the first real crack in a decades-long partnership? Something that could signal a much bigger, more permanent shift in the global alliances that shape our world. I guess only time will tell.